Everyone. Next, we have NeuroMetrix. It trades under the symbol NURO on the NASDAQ. It's a commercial stage healthcare company that develops and commercializes neurotechnology devices to address unmet needs in the chronic pain and diabetes markets. The company has two commercial brands, Quell. It's a wearable neuromodulation platform, and DP Check. It's a point-of-care screening test for peripheral neuropathy. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Shai Gozani, Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of NeuroMetrix. Nice to see you again, Dr. Shai. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Anna. I appreciate it.
Great. The floor is yours.
Super. Thank you very much. Okay, great. So thank you for joining us this morning. This is a presentation about NeuroMetrix. I will just pause for a moment with a forward-looking statements disclaimer. Please take a look at our recently filed Qs and Ks for a complete list of risk factors. So at NeuroMetrix, our mission is clear, and that is to improve the lives of patients living with chronic pain, and we do that through the development and commercialization of neuromodulation devices. And really, even beyond the direct experience of pain, we focus on the overall quality of life of patients who are suffering from chronic pain syndromes. And there's much more to this experience than just pain. There's really a devastating impact on quality of life, and we try to address that with our devices. The investment thesis for NeuroMetrix is really pretty straightforward, and it's outlined here. We've developed an advanced wearable neuromodulation platform called Quell, which I'll discuss in detail today. It'll really be the focus of the presentation. That device already has two breakthrough device designations from the FDA, one for fibromyalgia and another for chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, or CIPN. We'll talk about that. We've launched the fibromyalgia indication through a strategic effort into the U.S. market. We're about a year into that. We'll talk extensively about our results thus far. We also have a pipeline of additional clinical indications beyond fibromyalgia that will dramatically expand the addressable market. We have legacy products, which is primarily our neurodiagnostic business that generates positive cash flow that offsets some of our capital needs to grow the neuromodulation business. And in terms of where we are from a balance sheet perspective, we have sufficient cash on the balance sheet to fund our near-term growth. We have no debt and a very simple capital structure consisting of only common stock. So first, just to talk about Quell. This is a wearable device. It's placed, as you can see in the image, on the upper calf. It stimulates electrically, it stimulates the peripheral nerves, both the superficial nerves as well as the deep nerves in that area. And what that does is that evokes a pain relief response, which I'll talk about in a moment. What's unique about Quell relative to other similar types of devices is it's the only device, wearable device, that achieves high dose use. And what that really means is that it can be used for multiple hours every day. It's typically used 4 to 8 hours per day, 4 to 8 hours per day, including during sleep. And that's really the key to its effectiveness. The way it works, I mean, the mechanisms are still being elucidated, but one of the key mechanisms we believe is that it reduces what's called pain hypersensitivity. And this is the propensity of the brain to in some chronic pain conditions, to over-amplify pain signals, such that even mildly painful or even non-painful signals are perceived as painful by the individual, and then mildly painful or moderately painful signals are perceived as very, very painful. We believe that what Quell is doing through nerve stimulation is reducing that pain hypersensitivity, which is also called central sensitization. And that leads to a type of pain called nociplastic pain, which is pain that originates in the brain, not in the periphery. And nociplastic pain is a component of many forms of chronic pain. This technology is highly proprietary. It's protected by 26 U.S. utility patents, as well as many international patents and many patent applications in process. Quell really sits in a favorable position relative to other relatively modest cost widely used chronic pain treatments. This is particularly true for this type of nociplastic pain that I was referencing before, which is the pain that is originating in the brain as opposed to in the periphery. Both the existing commercial assets as well as the pipeline have a very large addressable market of over 30 million patients in the U.S. There are two commercial stage assets. The first is called Quell Relief. That's our over-the-counter version, which was launched in 2015 and then was paused in 2022 in order to focus on our fibromyalgia indication, which is our second commercial asset. And that's called Quell Fibromyalgia, which will be the focus for our discussion. But we actually have two commercial viable or commercially ready versions of Quell. In terms of our pipeline, beyond fibromyalgia, our most advanced program is for chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, or CIPN. As I mentioned earlier, we have a breakthrough designation for this. CIPN is a common complication of chemotherapy. I'll talk a little bit more about it. We just recently filed a 510K for that indication in about mid-December. So we're excited by that and looking forward to interacting with the FDA, hopefully leading to regulatory clearance in the first half of this year. Beyond CIPN, we have additional indications in process that we have clinical data on. Another one that's leading towards a near-term 510K filing is a version of long COVID. About 1/3 of patients with long COVID have a fibromyalgia-like presentation. We have some favorable pilot data, which we believe may be adequate to get 510K clearance. So we'll be moving forward with that program as well. And beyond that, we have additional programs for low back pain and what's called chronic overlapping pain conditions, which was really a basket of these nociplastic pain syndromes that I mentioned earlier. So a really deep pipeline, but already two commercial assets. So just focusing on fibromyalgia specifically, because that is our commercial focus. This is a large or common condition, quite debilitating. It's characterized by pain throughout the body as well as tenderness. That's that hypersensitivity that I mentioned earlier. But it's also complicated by other what are called somatic symptoms, such as fatigue, poor sleep, cognitive impairment, such as what's often called brain fog, mood issues, and there's just an overall low quality of life. The prevalence is about 6% of the U.S. population. Not all diagnosed. Those that are diagnosed are typically women. There are really very few treatment options. There are 3 approved drugs. The last one was approved over probably now 14 years ago. They are effective to some degree, but have a lot of side effects. So they're not ideal for these patients because of all the symptoms they already have. So really limited treatment options for these patients. This slide shows some of the data that we obtained in our double-blind randomized control trial, sham control trial, that was the basis for receiving FDA authorization for Quell in the fibromyalgia indication. And without going into all the details, what you can see here is for symptom improvement, for pain improvement, for overall quality of life improvement, there was a much stronger response in the active group, which was receiving a Quell device, which is in the dark blue, versus the sham group in the light blue, which received a low-dose version of Quell. So it wasn't even a passive device. It was actually a low-dose version of Quell. So pretty strong results. These particular graphs are for the subgroup of patients that had high pain sensitivity at baseline, which is the approved or authorized indication from the FDA. So we received that clearance in 2022, early 2022, and we launched the product in late 2022, about a year ago. And this slide shows sort of the core messages for the launch. First of all, Quell Fibromyalgia is authorized not just to reduce the pain of fibromyalgia, but more broadly the symptoms. And as I said before, the experience of fibromyalgia extends beyond pain to these other symptoms such as poor sleep, fatigue, brain fog, and so forth. It's, of course, a drug-free intervention. It's a wearable, non-invasive, with really no side effects of significance, other than occasionally some local skin irritation, which resolves quickly. And this is a highly personalized and customizable intervention. Patients can use it as they need. Some patients may use it for a few hours a day. Other patients may use it for 8 to 12 hours a day. They may use it during the day. They may use it during sleep, whatever is required to manage their particular instance of fibromyalgia. In terms of how we're commercializing this indication, really four channels. I'll focus on the first three. We have a small direct sales effort where we promote Quell Fibromyalgia to physicians to write prescriptions. We have a national sales director and then 2 regional business development directors. Primarily, we're calling on rheumatologists, pain medicine physicians, neurologists, and to a lesser extent, some primary care physicians. And that is really building up support and familiarity within the physician community with Quell Fibromyalgia. The next element of our commercialization strategy is a direct-to-patient and telehealth approach. We're building awareness through digital marketing, through associations with fibromyalgia support groups such as the NFA, where we have a partnership. NFA is the National Fibromyalgia Association, which is the largest fibromyalgia advocacy group. We recently launched a telehealth option late December. We've already received some telehealth prescriptions that way. So patients can, via our website and a partnership with Beluga Health, get a telehealth visit and an immediate prescription. So they don't even have to see their physician. They can do this all via telemedicine option, which is very convenient for some patients. The third element is looking at various healthcare systems and partnerships that we can utilize to scale Quell deployment. Our focus right now is primarily on the Veterans Administration hospitals, Veterans Administration Health. We have already been approved for prescriptions to be reimbursed in the Northern California, Nevada, and Hawaii region, and are now starting to get prescriptions from physicians in those regions. What's attractive about this channel for us is, as you'll see shortly, the commercial channel is cash pay. This is a reimbursed channel, so it gives us 2 pathways into the market. And finally, eventually, we will look at international markets, but that's something we won't start looking at until next year at the earliest. As I noted, outside of the VA, this is a cash pay option right now for patients. We think that's actually an attractive approach because it is a very transparent process for patients, and it gives physicians a high degree of clinical autonomy. If they feel that the intervention, the treatment is appropriate for their fibromyalgia patients, they simply prescribe it. They don't have to go through the complexity of third-party reimbursement. The way it works is there's an initial month prescription, which is $75, and then there's a $199 refill for every 90 days. So on average, it's about $800 cost to the patient per year, and comparably revenue to us. So as I said, we launched Quell Fibromyalgia about a year ago, really right at the end of 2022. And this slide shows some of the operating metrics to date through the fourth quarter. So what you can see in the first the first graph, which is labeled unique prescribers, this is the number of providers, mostly physicians. There's also some physician assistants and nurse practitioners that write prescriptions, but it is mostly physicians. You can see the number of prescribers that wrote at least one prescription in that quarter. So in the first quarter of last year, 92 unique prescribers. That increased to about 200 unique prescribers in the past quarter 4. The next set of graphs shows the prescription and refill activity. The first four bars there are the number of prescriptions that were written in that quarter. So you can see in the first quarter of last year, 230 prescriptions, and that increased to 580 prescriptions in the fourth quarter. So a really nice increase. Now, what you can see here is that we added the two business development managers that I mentioned. We added them about middle of the third quarter. So they started to have a positive impact on our sales activity in the fourth quarter. That's reflected in these numbers. The next set of graphs labeled prescriptions filled are the number of prescriptions that were amongst the prescriptions that were written that were actually filled by the patients. Not every, like as for any prescription, they're not always filled by patients. We've seen a pretty consistent 60% fill rate, which we're quite happy with. We do think that can even be increased further. So what you can see is that in a typical quarter, about 60% of the written prescriptions are filled by the patients. And the final set of bars is the number of refill months. As you can see, in the first quarter, there were 141 months of refill. Again, the refills are in 3-month lots. And that increased every quarter up to 525 the last quarter. So this reflects the growing number of patients that are using Quell fibromyalgia on a regular basis. So we're pretty excited by these initial results. Obviously, these are still relatively low numbers in terms of the market size, but at least showing us that we're starting to get traction in the market. We're learning a tremendous amount about the market dynamics. So just moving on briefly to the pipeline, I did want to just say a few points about our CIPN indication. Again, this is chronic chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, or CIPN. Again, this is a common complication of chemotherapy, affecting about 30% of the 700,000 to 1 million people that have chemotherapy every year. There's no approved drugs for this. So if we are successful in getting FDA clearance, we'd be the first FDA-authorized treatment for CIPN. And I won't go into the details here, but you can just see some of the clinical data that we have supporting our FDA submission. And what you can see here is that for pain, various forms of what's called neuropathic pain, or hot burning pain, or sharp stabbing pain, that's the kind of pain that's characteristic of CIPN, as well as muscle cramps, which are a big problem in these patients. You can see that in the active arm, there was a much greater decrease over the course of the study, which was 6 weeks, than for the sham arm. Before getting to some of the financials and wrapping up, I just wanted to say a few points about our legacy and neurodiagnostic business. This has been largely our revenue and profit driver, or margin driver to date. The primary product in this business is what's called DPN check, which is a point of care test for peripheral neuropathy, which is a term for degeneration of nerves. It's caused by diabetes, by aging, and in fact also by CIPN. This is a product we've had for over a decade. Over 2 million patients have been tested, and our focus has always been on value-based care markets. And primarily it's been on Medicare Advantage. Unfortunately, early last year, CMS made some very substantive changes in how they compensate healthcare providers and plans for screening various complications of health complications, including peripheral neuropathy. So that has had a very substantive impact on our business that we're trying to adjust to, but you'll see that reflected in our numbers. And we do also have an international business for DPN check. So looking at our revenues by year, for 2023, we've only reported through Q3. We will do our year end, and reporting will be in the second half of February. But you can see that on a run rate, we'll be looking at a decrease in revenue this year. And this is entirely due to the decrease in DPN check revenue due to these Medicare Advantage changes. We are trying to work through changes in our strategy that will offset those, but at least in the near term, we've had to absorb these decreases in revenue. Margins have stayed relatively stable. And as of Q4, we're starting to see material contributions from the Quell fibromyalgia business, and those will grow this year and begin to become a more relevant piece of our revenue stream. And ultimately, we think we'll offset the decreases in DPN check, but that will take some time. In terms of our balance sheet, it's very straightforward. As of the end of Q3, we had $17.5 million in cash and cash equivalents. That number should stay relatively stable through the end of the year. We have no debt. Taking a look at our kind of operating cash usage, it was about $5.5 million in 22. It was $4.7 million through the third quarter of 23. And that increase was primarily related to, that run rate increase is primarily related to investments in the Quell fibromyalgia business. Capital structure is very similar, as I mentioned at the beginning. It's common shares only. And we did execute a 1-for-8 split on November 21st of last year to maintain our NASDAQ listing requirements, the $1 minimum bid price. So that the share counts that you see here are pre-split. In terms of our plan to create shareholder value this year, it's really pretty straightforward. First and foremost is to grow the Quell fibromyalgia business that is now commercial. And as we said, we've had 1 year of strategic experience, so we can start to see where we should place our investments to grow this business even faster. We're looking to expand the Quell business with a CIPN indication and commercial launch before the end of the year. We're also looking to advance our low back pain, as well as other indications with regulatory filings this year, which will set us up well for additional growth in 2025. As I mentioned, the DPN check business has really been our cash flow offset, and we've suffered some deterioration there starting last year with the CMS changes. So we are working hard to adjust our business strategy to shift our focus away from Medicare Advantage or reduce our Medicare Advantage exposure into other sectors that are not as affected by these CMS reimbursement changes. And finally, we're always intend to be strategic, so we're looking at various partnership opportunities, collaborations, anything that can leverage our infrastructure and our products. And that really wraps up the presentation. So I'd be happy to take some questions at this point.
Great job. Yeah, let's jump right in. So now that the FDA has your 510(k) submission for CIPN, what's the process and how long before you receive clearance?
Yeah, so we submitted it, as I said, about mid-December. Typically, the FDA will take, on a 510(k), will take a month and a half to 2 months. There was a holiday break in there, so it's probably closer to 2 months to get back to us with their initial set of questions. And then depending on how long those take to respond to, we would respond. And then the FDA would, we'd have some back and forth. So all in all, you're probably looking at, I would say, 5 to 6 months before getting a final decision.
And with the CIPN, when do you expect to bring it to the market, and how are you planning on commercializing it?
Yeah, so assuming that we get the clearance in the first half of the year, and we feel optimistic about that, but this is a novel indication. As I said, there are no FDA cleared, authorized, or approved CIPN treatments, so we are kind of the leading edge here. So that that could add time. But let's say we get in the first half of the year, we would be looking to launch before the end of the year. And there's, in terms of how we launch it, there's still some questions in terms of branding, whether we would brand that under Quell or as a separate brand. We would launch it through our existing commercial infrastructure, through also the same channels that I alluded to previously for Quell fibromyalgia. They would all they would all be applicable to Quell CIP, just the CIPN indication as well.
And do you expect to increase the size of your Quell Direct sales force this year?
We're considering that. I mean, we're looking at all the data and the efficiency, effectiveness of our sales team, and what the best target is for our sales investments, our commercializing investments. So it's a possibility, but we haven't made any final decisions on that.
And talk about where you're receiving most of your prescriptions. Is it from physicians or through telehealth?
Yeah, at this point, it's almost entirely from physicians. As I mentioned, the telehealth option was only launched in December, and so we started to receive prescriptions just in the last several weeks. So the vast majority to date have been through physicians. We do expect the telehealth channel to be substantive, and is sort of the target for our direct to patient efforts, educational efforts. Is just basically telling them, educating them about Quell fibromyalgia, and then directing them either to go to their own physicians or conveniently go through the telehealth channel. So I do expect telehealth to become a more prominent component of our prescription numbers, but at least at this point, it's still primarily directed by physicians.
And you seem to have good growth in your refills. Are you satisfied with the results?
Yeah, we are pleased with the growth. What we really wanted to see in this year is we wanted to collect the data that will allow us to model the business effectively, to understand the number of refills and the refill behavior of our patients, and I think we've gotten a lot of data to do that. What we are seeing is that some portion of our patients are refilling very consistently and at the numbers that we were looking for, and then certain other patients are not. And we're looking at the characteristics of the two groups to see what we can do up front to try to tilt the refill rates towards the more favorable numbers. But overall, I'd say we are pleased, and we definitely have, but we also have work to do there to improve that.
Bill Chapman wants you to provide the latest on obtaining insurance on any of your current or future product offerings.
Yeah, we're in terms of Quell fibromyalgia, as I said, we're in the physician prescription business that I mentioned. We are satisfied proceeding on a cash pay basis. We think that's the most effective approach. But we are looking at, as I mentioned, various pockets of reimbursement, such as the VA, potentially some value-based care organizations. So we see a hybrid model, but are not focused on getting broad reimbursement from all commercial insurers and Medicare, because that's a very long, arduous, and expensive process that's not necessarily likely to be successful.
And Larry Poole wants you to talk a little bit about the device. So what's recommended as far as when it can be worn? Just everyday activities?
So the device can be worn typically up to about 9 or 10 hours a day, if necessary, but really patients wear it as they need it. So some patients may only need a few hours a day. Other patients may need 5 or 6 hours, 7 hours a day. It really depends on their particular symptoms and their pattern and their particular condition. So there is no absolute specific recommendation, other than that that patients should try to use it for several hours every day. Otherwise, it's not going to be as effective.
And Blake asks, if the product's purchased, what's the warranty, and is there any service required to it?
There was a 1-year warranty on the device, 2 years in federal health programs like the VA, but the servicing requirements are very, very limited for a product like this. It's very robust. We've now had over 250,000 devices shipped between our OTC versions and our prescription fibromyalgia version, so we're quite comfortable with that.
And some questions concerning sales. Bill Chapman and Grant Barnett ask, do you see the possibility of partnering with a sales partner, and who will be recommending it? Do they have an incentive to recommend the product?
As I mentioned, one of our channels is systems and partnerships. So yes, absolutely, we're always looking at ways to leverage organizations that might be beneficial to our commercialization efforts. As I was saying, fibromyalgia is kind of an orphan condition, even though it's very, very common. In the sense, from a commercial perspective, there is no company outside of NeuroMetrix really that is actively commercializing a fibromyalgia indication. So there's no obvious immediate partner. Now there are other parallel markets that may be suitable, such as other chronic pain treatments. But as far as fibromyalgia concerned, we're kind of the only fibromyalgia focused company. In terms of, I think the other question was, how do the recommendations work? I mean, the physicians do not have a financial incentive to prescribe this, nor do they have a financial incentive to prescribe drugs for fibromyalgia. It's just part of what they're doing to try to help the patient.
And last question due to time, talk a little bit about the market today and your valuation, specifically your cash position. Last reported 17 million in your market cap, which is around 4 million. Neil Cataldi asks, were there any unexpected or significant changes to the cash position during the fourth quarter?
There were no significant changes to the cash in the fourth quarter.
Okay. Do you have any closing remarks for our viewers?
No, thank you very much for taking the time this morning to hear our update. And thank you, Anna.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Okay, everyone, stay with us. We'll be right back.